Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin today's meeting by offering my condolences to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. For anyone who might be watching today's meeting, I'd like to advise that you have the opportunity to share your condolences at 9 of Logan City Council's libraries and Council's Customer Service Centre and Administration Centre, and that service will be available to you until Saturday the 24th of September or the 23rd of September in the instance of the Customer Service Centre. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and by paying my respect to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Lifestyle meeting of the 14th of September 2022, and I declare the meeting open at 9 a.m. I'd like to advise attendees in the room that the meeting is being webcasted and audio recorded. Now, to my knowledge, we don't have any leaves of absence to declare, but I would just like to note that Councillor Lane will be joining us via Teams shortly, so we will welcome her to the meeting in due course. With no leaves of absence to record, I think we'll get straight underway. We've got a very busy agenda ahead of us. Councillors, I'd like you to draw your attention to item 4.1. 4.1 is the 2021-2022 Community Infrastructure Report. And can the Acting Sport, Leisure and Facilities Manager, Mr Ben O'Bray, please enter the discussions? But before we get underway, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they wish to declare? There being none, I'll now pass over to Mr O'Bray. Ben, you can please lead us in discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. This quarterly report in front of you is a consolidation of the previous Community Infrastructure Strategy Program-based Budget Update Report and the Community Infrastructure from Community Services Branch and the Community Infrastructure Program Update Report from the Sport, Leisure and Facilities Branch. The intention of this report is to provide Council with a progress update of all of its major sporting and community infrastructure projects across the city. I do acknowledge this report is from the end of the fourth quarter of the previous financial year at that point in time, and there has been considerable progress on a number of projects since then, which I'd like to highlight you all on for a moment. The Logan North Pool remains on track for completion. It's full of water, as we now know, and due for opening in early October. The Buzz at Yarrabilba is on track for practical completion in October. The design of the Riverine Discovery Centre the design contract has been awarded and design is commencing. Stage 1 of the Queens Road Depot redevelopment is completed, being Stage 1 car parking and kennels, and Stage 2 is under construction, being the administration building out there. And we have had some wet weather delays at the Noffke Farm Park Clubhouse, and that's now anticipated for completion, I think, in November, unfortunately. I do acknowledge this is our first consolidated report on updates on all of our major sporting and community infrastructure projects, so keen to get please feel free to email me any suggestions or feedback you have on the report if you'd like any more information included in future quarterly reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and I greatly appreciate the consolidated report myself. I think it is a one-stop shop for councillors to understand what infrastructure projects are in the pipeline, where we're at with those and what ones are coming forward. So I found the report very easy reading. Thank you very much. We've got some questions. I'll pass over to Councillor Bradley to kick us off.
Thank you, through the Chair, and I agree 100%. It is good to have one report. I'm just curious if there's going to be an official opening of the pool?
Yes, we do plan on having an official opening for the pool.
And councillors will be invited?
Yes,
in the
yes.
community, or how will that plan out?
I'll probably, if I can, take this offline and have a discussion with you, but I'll certainly work with our Leisure Centres team to pin down the date and the opening, and probably our events team as well to work with councillors and that community. I think we'll try and give it most likely a soft start on day one, with the official big opening to come shortly thereafter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I just wanted to echo your thoughts that the blending of the two reports is great, less duplication, easy to understand. I love the on-track monitor completed stuff, so it's like quick glance, we can see what's going on and ask questions about the ones that need help. Great work, Ben, keep it up.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. I also appreciate we've got various program leaders and managers and so on in the room at your ready to answer any questions you might have. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the chair. Good morning, Ben and team. I'd just like to say thank you on the hard work that you're doing for Division 12. There's quite a few projects in here that are out there for our community. Obviously, Chris Green Park will start soon. We have the planning of the Beanley Pool, the River Ryan Centre, air conditioning for the library, and etc. So thank you very much for all your work that you have done and for our community.
Thank you, Councillor. Sounds good to be in Division 12. Councillor Herrmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm asking a question in regards to page 13 of the overall agenda, and on that page there's a table, and item 1.9 of that table states that there's a project called the Parkridge Town Centre Hub, and that's a community centre, library, art space and performing arts area that's planned for the very long term, very far away, but it's important to secure that land. So when I look at this, I'm keen to understand an update on that project, and I can see that an achievement for the 21 to 22 financial year was that internal discussions regarding land requirements for facility and development opportunities were done. That was an achievement, that was actioned. And then I look at the project update from the 1st of April to the 30th of June, and it states that internal discussions regarding land requirements for facility and development opportunities were actioned. So that's the exact same statement from the annual achievements for 21 to 22 and then the quarterly update. What I'd love to see going forward, especially with this project, are some more tangible details when it comes to what's happening in council, what's been progressed, and what's the next stages. So for example, the quarterly update would be great to understand what sort of meetings were held, what sort of internal discussions were held, and what are the next steps as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herrmeyer. That's a great suggestion. We'll certainly look to accommodate that. Noelle, is there anything you'd like to update the council on that project while we're here?
Hi, thank you, Councillor, and through the chair. Yes, we have held internal discussions, and while there were multiple stages to that, so we're looking at a piece of land, so we have an identified piece of land, and it's gone through a few stages, so I understand it's been reported in 2 quarters. So over the next month or so, we should be able to officially get that land transferred to us. We're working with an internal partner, and we were working across DA and Parks to secure and identify if the land that is available to us in a fantastic location would be of suitable size to accommodate all of the facilities that we're looking at. And we are on the road to understanding that could be, and therefore getting that land transferred to the program.
Thanks for that. And as the local councillor for the area, it'd be great to be kept up to date regarding those plans, and especially any transfers and any requirements that have been identified for the future facility.
Thank you, Councillor Herrmeyer, and just ask the officers to please, I'm sure that you will, but engage with the area councillor at any critical junctures, keeping him abreast of what's going on. Thank you. I have a question from the Mayor, Mr Power.
It's not a question, it's more of a statement. In all the years that I've been here, all the councillors that I've worked with have all said, you know, let's see the rubber hitting the road. And there's no bigger project or injection of funds for capital programs than this currently now. This is a massive challenge. And I've known Ben for a long time when he started his cadetship here as an engineer, and I know he's up for the job. So Ben, you accept the challenge, because there's going to be a lot of councillors here putting a lot of pressure on you about delivering, but I'm sure you're up to it. I know you're a good officer. I just, you know, when I look at this, I know we've made some really good decisions on making this funding available to make things happen, and we desperately need these things to happen. So, Brad, I'm not putting any pressure on you, but it's probably one of the most important jobs here at the moment is delivering these projects. So best of luck, and hopefully we'll get through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I do appreciate too that we're a couple of years in now and we're starting to see some of those major projects roll off the books as well. I know Queen's Road's been a big one that's been on the books for quite some time. We're all very excited about the pool, and the local area councillor, I can assure you, is ecstatic about the buzz that's happening out in Yarrabilba. I have a question from Councillor Hall.
Not a question, more of a statement. Look, I really need to thank you guys. The amount of problems we've had over the last 2 years in terms of weather, in terms of impacts from COVID, unbelievable. I mean, you only have to drive around the Logan or even other parts of Australia to see a lot of constructions are at a standstill in terms of materials not being available, workers not being available, all kinds of problems, and yet council just seems to be progressing forward and moving further and further towards. I'd like to thank the patience of the Waterford Demons. They've been very patient on their clubhouse, and they get it. I talk to them and they understand. They understand what's going on with the construction industry. They understand that there's a lack of resources out there at the moment. And, you know, even though we did mention that the clubhouse has been delayed, it's not a surprise to anyone, because, you know, we've gone through a massive flooding event, and for that site to be in you know, the great condition that it is after that, it's really a testament to those people who are out there working, and especially to you guys who are always pushing forward. So a big thank you from me to you guys and the great work you do, and a shout out to Francis Mills. He's been a very hard worker, and he's been on to me every day with updates of what's going on. So you're doing great work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Councillors, there's a motion on the board behind me that the report of the Sport, Leisure and Facilities Manager dated 14th of September 2022 be received. Could I have a mover for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Hall. A seconder for the motion, and Councillor Murphy. Can I see your support by a show of hands? I note that has been unanimously supported by all present, and we're still awaiting Councillor Lane to join us at this stage, I believe. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, that marks the end of the Acting Sport, Leisure and Facilities Manager's reports. Do we have any general business for the Acting Manager? Oh, this is a first. Mr O'Brien, do you have any general business for us?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you, everyone. Councillors, I now draw your attention to item 5.1. 5.1 is the 2021-2022 annual report on the Active and Healthy Crank School Holiday and Swim Logan programs. I know these are very popular programs among councillors, and I look forward to hearing the latest report. So I'm going to ask our Acting Community Service Manager, Mr Trevor Knappy, to enter discussions. But before we open the floor, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they wish to declare? There being none, I will now refer to Mr Knappy to open for public discussion. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bogle Butchara. So good morning, and Yugambeh language. We're very excited to present this annual report, and I'm going to ask Michelle to just provide a quick few stats and updates that are exciting to hear about.
Thanks, Trevor. Through the Chair, this is our normal annual progress report on all of the great things that we've done over the last financial year, so that's up until June this year. It outlines all of our attendance numbers, some of the really positive impacts that it's had on the community. It outlines a few of the challenges, but the solutions that we've come up with as well. A few of the key statistics in there: over 6,500 young people attended Crank in that financial year, over 7,000 people attended our Active and Healthy program, and over 3,000 attended our Swim Logan program. You'll see some really nice stories in the background paper, but I suppose they're the statistics and numbers of people that have turned up to the activities. There's lots more amazing stories that have come out of these programs, but I'm happy to take the report as being read and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I have a question from Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Look, these programs are absolutely amazing, and I hear a lot from the community about them. I guess just a couple of the stats I was just curious to get a bit more info on, just quickly if I could. It noted that only 20% of participants are male. And do you think that, do we have any understanding as to why? Is it the types of activities, or I'm just simply curious as to why that might be?
Through the chair, so in Active and Healthy, is that the, yes, through the Active and Healthy program?
Yes, it was the
Yeah,
Active and Healthy, sorry, yes.
Yeah, it's common for us to get less males attend.
Okay.
In the last few years, we've really tried to start programming specific men's programs. So in addition, or it's a duplication, but we
Yes.
take out all of those activities for men and put them into a separate Active and Healthy for Men program.
I've seen that, yeah.
They're just a harder target audience, I suppose, to attend the program. So we started doing golf and really social connected programs for men to attend. It is an increase in the numbers that we've had, but it's still just more difficult. A lot more females attend our yoga and Tai Chi classes and things like that. We still continue to try and put more male-related programs in there to increase those numbers.
Yeah. It's interesting because I still hear from especially older males in the community, they're trying to find things to do. So it's just, might be worth, might even have a chat to you offline about some ideas there. Just really quickly too, the feedback I get obviously regarding the Crank program from residents is if they would love to have an online booking system, they still think that would be lovely. And that's, moving forward, I know that that's in the pipeline per se, like if it's been discussed before, but that's the only other feedback I had in that space. So thank you.
Through the chair, it's a great question, and I'm very pleased you brought it up. But we continue to look at it, and we have noted it again as a challenge. We obviously put the service enhancement forward last time, which was a lot of money, and we did that because of the continual complaints and requirements. But we're working really closely with Business Transformation and the IS team to look at what we can do that is more streamlined and more efficient. So we're continuing to do that as quickly as we possibly can because we're really aware of it. Just quickly, sort of back to your other comment as well, we're going out to RFQ to request for quote soon. So you'll all receive an email, or by the end of the year we'll go out to quote. So we're going to send you all an email to let you know. You can promote that through your channels, but you can also just email me whenever if you've got providers that you want to quote for the program at any stage throughout the year. So we're really open to that, and then we will connect with those people directly to get them to quote for the program. So yeah, if there's anyone specific for men's programs, please just send it through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp, and in case anyone missed that, this did come up for a service enhancement in the past in terms of adding resources to enable people to book online, so you may revisit that in the fullness of time. I have a question from Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the chair. Good morning. I have a very passionate resident in Eagleby, and there's not a lot of crank activities in Eagleby. Could I ask, what does council do to encourage more local providers, and are there any incentives available to businesses to provide crank programs in those areas?
Through the chair, yes, we do a lot of we go out for requests for quote broadly and people can apply. The team also do a lot of research, desktop research, to find out if we haven't heard from you guys as to new people in the area. We will also look for new providers specifically. We will always, as best we can, fund our local service providers over people from the Gold Coast or Brisbane or other places. So we will, as a part of our criteria, that is highlighted as something that we will always look to do. Sometimes if the young people have requested certain activities, ninja courses, that we don't have a provider in Logan and they're based at the Gold Coast, then we will use that provider. But it's certainly a priority of ours to use local people. And yeah, if there are people that sometimes we just don't know about them, but we will engage with them. The team meet with them and even talk to them. So,
thank you, Michelle. So if a provider out there is listening, they can get in contact with council, just ring the normal number to get through to the community services. And the same with residents, if they're passionate about some sort of activity in their area, they can contact council too and make their feelings known, and we can work around that. Thank you so much for that answer. I hope that's answered the residents' question as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. I have a question from Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing it back. You know I love both of these programs and that sort of thing. I actually just wanted to do a big thanks to, I've just been updating a few posts and that sort of thing to come out for the school holidays, because I know that I've been out and I've been speaking to my businesses, you know, do you know about these programs, how to get on that, and I've been encouraging them, and it's really good that I've actually seen 2 extra ones added, one to each program, with Be All Natural with their bee workshop, and Splash, who've now come on with Aqua. So, and I went and did it last week just to encourage it and that sort of thing. So, thank you, and thanks to those businesses for coming on board. And yes, encourage any business out there to get in contact with Michelle's team. Thank you.
I know you're a big fan, Councillor Wilcox. Thank you, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Through the chair, that actually reminded me, talking about bees, that reminded me of a conversation at my mobile office where some bee advocates came and spoke to me about this specifically, and educating people about our native bees and our bees in general. So is it possible to share where potential providers can tap into to get involved in this? Thank you.
Thanks. So, Michelle, how will that be distributed? Will you send an email out to councillors?
Yeah, through the chair. So we'll send an update through the councillor, the CEO update with all of the information, and we'll give you plenty of time to be able to share that on your social media, and also then talk to people individually and send them our way. So we'll give you plenty of time.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. We've got a very busy schedule. Councillor Wilcox.
I was just going to add, I actually grabbed a bunch of Michelle's business cards and just took them around to businesses when I was chatting. So if you need to, ask her for some business cards.
Excellent. Thank you, councillors. Any other questions? Excellent. Councillors, you'll see that there's a recommendation on the board behind me that the report of the Community Service Manager dated the 14th of September 2022 be received. Do I have a mover for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Seconded by Councillor Stemp. By show of hands, all those in favour? Thank you, everyone. That's been unanimously supported. Has Councillor Lane joined us online yet? Councillor Lane's not here at this stage. Okay. Thank you, everybody. All right, councillors. That marks the end of our Acting Community Service Manager's report. Do we have any general business for the manager? There being none, Trevor, do you have any general business for us?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, everyone, for your hard work. Okay, councillors, I now draw your attention to item 6.1. Item 6.1 is the legal dumping and litter enforcement strategy for 2022 to 2025. And as I open item 6.1 open for discussion, can the City Standards and Animal Care Manager, Miss Emily Shafto, please enter the discussions? But before we get underway, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest to declare? There being none, I'll also welcome Michael Asmakar. Hello, Michael, good to see you. And I'll now hand over to Emily to lead discussions. Thank you, Emily.
Through the Chair, good morning, Mayor and councillors. Today we are excited to present to Council an illegal dumping and litter enforcement strategy 22 to 25, seeking endorsement. Illegal dumping and littering is a highly visible and really negative form of pollution in the city, one which really erodes city image and pride. Often these acts are motivated by nothing more than sort of individual choice and done out of convenience or commercial gain. So recently Council established an illegal dumping task force which has achieved some significant success over the past 18 months in delivering 24/7 covert surveillance, detection of offences, finding offenders, and installing a range of litter deterrence signage in hotspot locations across the city. However, like many locations across the state, the problem of illegal dumping and littering is one of considerable scale, and the clean-up comes at great cost to the ratepayer. So right now, greater levels of accountability, deterrence and awareness are now needed. Recognising this, during this year's budget process, Council invested further funding over a 3-year period to tackle this problem in a strategic and coordinated way. With this funding certainty in place, formal endorsement of this strategy will now ensure the delivery of an action plan with defined measures and deliverables which drive lasting behavioural change and improve city image. So we are happy to take any questions on the matter.
Thank you, Emily. I have a question from Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the chair. Emily, I just wanted to say thank you for your team for joining us at the Real Estate Forum. You came and spoke to about 30 to 40 real estate agents the other day, how to tackle illegal dumping and leftover goods from tenants, which was fantastic, and we've had really great feedback. And also for the team for working with me in Division 12. I know we've had a few challenges, but our area is a cleaner area thanks to your team. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Do I have any other questions from any other councillors? I'd just like to make a comment. I note that Councillor Lane's not with us at the moment, but she was greatly appreciative of the work that was done in Division 2 and the Dob in a Dumper, I think it was called, campaign that was run out there, and I'm sure that this report will be a welcome addition to the work that has already been happening out there. And Emily, could you please pass on my sincere thanks to Sherry, who I know has been working very hard in this space and unfortunately was unable to be with us today. Did you have any further comment, Emily?
No, and thank you for your support, councillors. We look forward to rolling it out.
Fantastic. Okay, councillors, if you have a look to the board behind me, you'll actually see a recommendation on the board. I have a mover in Councillor Murphy, seconded by Councillor Hall. By a show of hands, can I see all those in favour? Noting not everybody's present just at the moment. So Mayor Power's out of the room, everyone else is supportive. Councillor Wilcox is out of the room, and I don't think we've got Councillor Lane with us yet. But otherwise, supported. So thank you, everyone, that's carried. Okay, councillors, I now draw your attention to item 6.2. 6.2 is the review of subordinate local law 9.2 election signs. And councillors, before we get into this report, I'd just like to remind you that there are effectively two decisions that we're looking at reaching today. So please lend your mind to this will be a two-step process. And before we get underway, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they wish to declare? There being none, I'll now pass over to the manager to present her report. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. Through the chair, today we present to Council a report on the regulation of election signs. For context, by way of brief background, Council currently regulates the display of election signage under subordinate local law 9.2 in the interests of upholding the safety and amenity of the city during election periods. In December 2020, Council considered the question of amending the local law, but resolved to defer it to a future City Lifestyle Committee, requesting that our branch, the City Standards and Animal Care branch, bring forward a new report. Like any policy matter which relates to rights, liberties and obligations, we recognise there are naturally a diverse range of views about how such a law should operate. Across the local government landscape generally, there is no uniform standard of regulation which applies to election signs. While diligently observing the implied freedom of political communication, Council maintains a degree of latitude how to best regulate election signs in our local government area. So to support the policy development process to explore future options, councillors were invited to participate in a workshop in April 2022 and participated in a further lengthy briefing in August 2022. Now that policy development process is complete, and having regard to critical factors relating to public safety, amenity and the implied freedom of political communication, this branch has prepared options for 1, being the content of the local law, and 2, being the degree to which the local law is enforced for Council to vote on today. The amendment options offered range from no change through to major change. Enforcement options range from no change through to up to current levels of enforcement through to a major investment in additional enforcement, marketing and education. So in summary, while any option presented in this report is ultimately capable of being implemented, we recommend that Council should consider all risks, benefits and financial implications when making these two decisions in the public interest. Thank you, and we are happy to take questions on the matter.
Thank you, Emily, and I thank you and your team for the time spent in bringing this report to Council. I know there was a considerable amount of work in the background, and to those councillors who also attended the workshops, I appreciate that. Councillors, do we have any questions? Did you have your hand up, Mr Mayor? No. Okay, councillors, the decision you have before you in the first instance is to consider the local law. Now, you've effectively got 3 options ahead of you. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, as they are option 1 is no change, option 2 is minor change, and option 3 is a major change, and those are all detailed in your report with associated costs. What we're going to do, I've got a question from Councillor Bradley, and then we'll move on to distilling down to where we're moving forward. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, I'm very passionate about this, and certainly a hot topic from constituents who are complaining about election signs during the last election. I probably won't put signs up next election, just saying, just putting it out there. I'm conscious of the environment and concerned about the waste. My preference, and I will be moving option 3.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. That gets the ball rolling. Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, there's no other person in this room that's gone through more elections than I have. I'm not going to say because it will give my age away, but what I will say is I first started in politics when there was heavy legislation applied to signage, and there was always someone that broke the rules, more than one. And what it did was it disadvantaged those people who complied. And it was always annoying to me because I would want to do the right thing, but I was always annoyed because you'd be outgunned by someone that didn't really care. And there's always ways and means of getting around legislation. And we can have the best intent with the best legislation, and there's always another way of getting around it. But the other factor is our budget. Councillors, we have done a really good job with our budgets, and we have been delivering quality projects, and we've been delivering good budgets. I want to keep that going, and I don't want to waste our money on paying officers overtime, weekends, nights, whatever, on policing signage. Now, I know the
Mr Mayor,
residents are going to complain.
I'm sorry to break your stride there, but just remember there's 2 decisions today. The first one actually pertains to how council will move forward, and the second decision relates to enforcement.
Yep. So I'm just giving you an understanding is that, yes, they're always going to complain. Whether there's 1 sign or there's 20 signs, they're going to complain. I would like to see the continuation of what's going on at the moment. 1, because it's cheaper to do. 2, you're never going to rule out those people that break the rules, and it gives everyone the same footing. You can't be fairer than that. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, just to be clear, are you an advocate for option 1, which is no change? Thank you, Mr Mayor. What I'm going to do, and I'm going to go to Councillor Herramiah to have his opportunity to speak. I have a mover with Councillor Bradley in the first instance who's supporting option 3, which is major change. The Mayor's indicated his preference for option 1, which I'll visit in due course, just so we're all on the same page. And I'll now pass to Councillor Herramiah, followed by Councillor Wilcox, followed by Councillor Fraser. Councillor Herramiah. Councillor Hall, I apologise if I missed you. In what order do you think you fell?
Councillor Hall was first.
Thank you. My apologies. I knew there would be a bit of excited debate with regard to this one. And Councillor Lane has joined us. I'm glad Councillor Lane's with us as well. And she has her hand up. So, councillors, allow me to just revisit the order. So we're going to go Councillor Hall first, followed by Councillor Herramiah, followed by Councillor Fraser, Councillor Wilcox, Councillor Fraser, Councillor Lane. Do I have any other takers? All right, thank you everyone, and my apologies if I overlooked you. I'm just trying to keep everybody in line. All right, so we'll kick off with Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to echo the Mayor's support for no change. The reason being that I don't believe any elected government should have the right to change the rules on which people get elected. It's called closing the gate behind you. I believe every person should have the same opportunity as that we had to get elected. And changing these rules is changing that. That's actually making it harder for people to do the right thing and advertise the way they can. Because what it will mean is for someone to run the same type of campaign that we did, they'd have to break the rules, they'd have to do it illegally, and that is unfair. People shouldn't have to do illegal things to try and be elected. I'm not scared of anyone who wants to run against me. I believe they should have the full right to do what they can to get their name out there and to advertise themselves. I'm not going to shut the gate behind me. I believe no change, leave it the way it is, leave it fair for everyone who wants to run in an election, and that's the way it should be. That's the way, the reason why the rules are as such as what they are. We should leave it. We shouldn't be shutting the gate behind us. Thank you.
Thank you for your sentiment and your passion, Councillor Hall. Councillor Herrmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to echo my support of Councillor Hall and the Mayor's vision for equality and fairness, because that's what this boils down to. When you look at the pros and the cons of the other options, they just don't weigh up. If you look at the cost, if you look at the precedent, if you look at the image that it sets when it comes to democracy in our city, it's clear that option one of no change is the best way to go regarding this local law. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herrmeyer. I'll now pass to Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. All right, so talking about fairness, let's talk about how many signs were impounded. In our 2019-2020 elections, 699 signs were impounded in the local election. That's for people doing the wrong thing. I don't know how many of you did the wrong thing, but I certainly didn't, and none of my signs were impounded. In the 2020-2021 state election, there were only 122 signs that were impounded. And in 2021-2022, in the federal election, there was only 161 signs that were impounded. So if we are going to change the laws and scaremonger, for me, I will echo and I will second Councillor Bradley on this and go for option 3. We are not closing the gate behind us. We're not making it easier for incumbents, but we are doing this in the public interest and the public safety so that everyone has a level playing field, everyone should have the same amount of time, everyone should have the same amount of numbers of signs across the city. Instead of having 6 or 7 candidates, so 6 candidates plus all the mayor candidates and everyone else, and having such white noise across the city, that's when you start to hear the complaints. I'll take my division because I'm the largest division, and I'll take the smallest division. So in my division, I have 318 square kilometres to cover. That's 1/3 of the city of Logan. And if I have 60 signs in my division, I have 1 sign every 5.3 square kilometres. If you take Division 2, which is Councillor Lane's, and it's the smallest division, and you put 60 signs in there, you have 1 sign every 270 metres squared. Then you add in the mayor, add in all the other candidates, and you have some serious white noise. Potentially you have 360 signs in a very, very small area. This is about the needs of the community, doing the right thing for them. It's in the public interest, it's in the public safety. It is giving a time frame so that it's not messy. It's giving us a certain number. If you look at Brisbane City, Gold Coast, Ipswich, Moreton Bay.
Councillor Wilcox.
Yep. They generally all have the same time. It's 6 weeks, and they all actually probably have less signage than us allowed. So I will second Councillor Bradley.
Councillor Herrmeyer, I'll put you on at the end. I want to give the other councillors an opportunity to speak unless you've got something short and sharp in response to that. No. Thank you for your patience, Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, yeah, the way that I see it and the way that people have spoken to me, it's more about how the city looks, how there's just signs strewn across the place everywhere for months on end. So I would like to see some change. I do like the thought of option 3, however, it is probably a bit too much too soon. So I actually would prefer probably option 2. However, I do have a few questions about some of the content, if I may ask the question, Madam Chair.
Yes, of course, please do.
So, Emily, in the limit period of display, it says in the 2-month period leading up to the election, does that mean, say an election was on the 30th of March, would that mean the 30th of January you're allowed to put it out, or is it an 8-week set period? Which would it be? Because it does matter in our elections, there's a leap year and stuff like that. It is an extra 4 days. And, yeah, people may or may not put signs out there, and it would just be interesting to know what exactly that looks like, if that's okay.
Thank you for that question. 2 months, I imagine it would be the beginning of January, as you say. So we'd have to work through the detail. What we would do is if councillors did vote for option 2, is to come back with the exact wording in the amendments for councillors to consider again. But today's purpose of today's discussion is achieving in principle support for the policy option. So my answer is we'd probably provide the exact clarity at that point of amendment.
However, we'd expect it to be around that 2 months.
That's right. Yeah, give or take a few days. Yeah,
One
thank you.
more question. As a concession to some of my colleagues here who would like to have no change, could we just make it even 3 months? Would that be too much of an issue if we did that? So that, I noticed during my election at least, people didn't tend to put stuff out until around Christmas-ish, but if it's after Christmas, after the mad rush, then would that cause any extra budgetary sort of issues at all? Or?
Through the chair, if I may respond, we're ultimately happy to deliver whatever timeframe councillors determine is appropriate, but there will be resourcing implications if, for example, there's an additional period of a month in which to display signage. That would be an additional period of a month likely in which enforcement action would be undertaken. So there would be consequences to that.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Fraser. In the interest of keeping us focused, we'll look at those 3 options clearly as they are at the moment, and if there's any variation to that, we'll address that in due course, if that's all right. Thank you. Councillor Lane is with us online, and I'd now like to open the floor to Councillor Lane. Sorry, Councillor Lane, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
We've got you. Thank you, Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much. So I'm option 1 simply because I want no change. I think that the reasons that the Mayor and Councillor Hall and Councillor Jeremiah stated are reasonable, and I'm elected to represent the people of Division 2. And I understand that every 200 odd square metres is significant. I think the issues around fairness and equality in a state there is a issue, in a bed there is a issue, and that's the start of my election period. Now, if we can find that as an agreement, 3 months, that would be outrageous, but if we did it 30 days before the date of an election, the signs may go out. That reduces the cost on the community. The other thing is the fine. I had one fine during the last election, and it was because of a misunderstanding of the local laws and what constituted a space that the sign should be being. So it was between 2 roads and a service road, and it was a genuine mistake. I don't believe people said it's a great thing for some to do, but most don't. And I think that democracy is a good thing. If we can, have it for 30 days where signs are displayed in our city, or when the citizens make federal elections, that is a fair and equitable outcome. I also think it's fine. And well worth having, for some candidates, having their signs impounded. So maybe that's something that we need to be doing, is increasing the cost of a fine for a deliberate and malicious
Thank you, Councillor, and I'm keen for us not to jump quite to enforcement yet, but I just wondered if Emily might want to respond to Councillor Lane's comments.
Through the chair, thank you. The only thing I'd add to that is the fine is considerable in size. It's $718.
Thank you. Now, councillors, I've got Councillor Stemp followed by Councillor Jeremiah. Did you have your hand up, Councillor Bannon? That's what I thought. Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. So are we just providing some information on both areas, or only one at the moment? Are we discussing both options?
I'd like to move through to this section and then move to enforcement if I can. Otherwise, I feel that I might lose my audience, Councillor Stamp.
That's all right. You just don't want us to come back and talk about option 2, though, again. Come back again for a second shot. We only
You
want
can speak
one.
to option 2 at this point in time if you'd like to.
Well, just really quickly then, just based on feedback from my community, time frame's one of the biggest bugbears as to how long the signs are out. So I'm leaning towards option 2. I think education and time frame is a good thing to put some more clarity on. But in terms of enforcement, option 1, because people do complain about these, but they always say to me that they get dealt with quite effectively. So I think the enforcement side of things is quite well done. So.
Thank you, Councillor Stemp, and I'm sorry if I created any confusion. I'm very happy for councillors to look at option 1, option 2 and option 3 at this stage, which is the options for, I'm just trying to be clear in my terminology so you understand, which is looking at the content of the local law as opposed to the enforcement of the local law. I'm sorry if I created any confusion there. Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to provide some context on some other local laws, especially with Brisbane City Council. Now, Brisbane City Council has been detailed really well in the report, and the federal election has been mentioned. And if you went into Brisbane City Council during the latest federal election, you wouldn't see these laws being observed. If you drove around Morningside, if you drove around West End, you would see some specific parties having dozens and dozens and dozens of signs on a single property. Across the whole electorate, there would have been hundreds, if not thousands of signs, which is a clear breach of the Brisbane City Council local law. Now, if you look at the result of that election, we saw 1 Labor seat and 2 Liberal seats change hands to a party that did break those local laws, as many have alleged. Now, I think that option 1 is the best option because it doesn't get involved in any of these messy allegations. It keeps things simple. It implements the same framework that's been around, that's worked in the past, and at the same time, it doesn't spend unnecessary expense on educating candidates and marketing and hundreds of thousands of dollars on these sort of programs. So I'd like to re-echo my support for option 1 and happy to move or second the Mayor when appropriate.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I did give Councillor Heremiah the latitude of having a second shot, and I will do that for the Mayor and Councillor Wilcox, but I will be shutting this debate down in due course if we're going to relitigate issues that you've already discussed. I'm going to Councillor Bannon first, Mr Mayor, and then I'm coming back to you. Councillor Bannon hasn't had the opportunity to speak at all yet. Councillor Bannon.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm with the Mayor. It doesn't. You can put as many rules as you want. When people start running for elections, they'll do whatever they want to do. Happens in state, happens in federal, and once one person does it, they all start doing it because everyone's scared of getting the jump on them. The state government are also looking at proposing, as we all know, expenditure caps. If someone wants to put restrictions on what we do, then I think the state government can go and do it. Because if we do it, yes, we will be accused of shutting the gate. Whether we do it or not, we'll be accused of that. I don't want to be accused of that. With the square meterage thing, we have big divisions, but half my divisions are cow paddocks. So if you look at square meterage, it's not really right because I'm going to put them where the people are. The cows couldn't care less what I do. So that's not really valid. But yeah, if they want to put restrictions on us, the state government can do it. And that way, it's their call, not ours. So I'm option 1.
Thank you, Councillor Bannon. Mr Mayor.
Look, I'm sorry I didn't say this in my first dig at this, but there was one thing I forgot, and that is that this is for state and federal, and I know in the past, political parties, if they believe they're unfair, and particularly when you've got high-profile incumbents, what chance has someone who wants to run for the first time, what chance have they got to get their face in when you're restricting their time, particularly before an election? If I was a state director, I would, because plenty of money, and this has happened in the past, I would take the council to court. And freedom of speech, if you tried to reduce the amount of coverage before an election for a candidate, and it wasn't in the interest of the party, they would go to court. And as soon as you go to court, you're talking big money. And then we get another blowout. So you're not only just paying for the officers to run around looking at signs all day and all night and keeping a record, you're also going to be involved in serious litigation and you'll have to defend it. And what happens is they do it at a time when it's close to the election, and then you don't know what you're doing. You don't know whether you should have signs in or out, and then it becomes like very hard to manage. So the best way to do it is don't change something that's not broken. This is the fairest way. This is the cheapest way, and let's face it, there's not very few candidates here that do the wrong thing when you have something like this, and generally people take their signs down straight after the election and it's all over for another 4 years. So I think when you look at all the yes and no's, I think, this is the best way.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got Councillor Wilcox.
But it is broken. We had 699 signs impounded across the city in the local election. We're the ones breaking the rules, not the state and federal election. Local government candidates are the ones breaking the rules because they can't follow the local laws that we have set in place so far. Emily, the other councils, have any of them been taken to court? Do you know of regarding these laws?
Through the chair, thank you for this question. I think it's fair to say across Australia generally, local government has been susceptible to legal challenge from time to time.
And have they been successful, do you know?
From time to time, yes.
Okay. But so far we have 4 other LGAs in the southeast Queensland that have very strict, stringent laws. We're the ones that aren't. We're the ones that are not playing by the rules from what I can see. And in regards to the funding or the costing of this, it is very minimal. Option 2 is at $10,000. Option 3 is $15,000 legal fees. It's when you're going into the enforcement of it, and it is still very minimal. It's only for a 3-month period, basically per year, which is like $200,000 across the 5-year period, which is very minimal for the public interest of our community and our residents that live here that would like to see this improved. I hear about it all the time, not from my residents, but from when I'm travelling, from friends and everyone else that I speak to, that this is an eyesore and it is white noise and it is distracting.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. I've got Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. So there's a couple of competing interests here, obviously. One is that we saw very clearly through this last federal election, we saw not so much through the state election, interestingly, and then through our election, that the public is annoyed at how many signs there are. How we address that is what we're debating today, but there is no doubt that the public doesn't like the overwhelming number of signs, especially at busy intersections and on big corners that are very visible and create visual pollution. And we're here to represent the majority of people, not here to represent or protect our future opponents, because they make a very, very small number of the community. That said, 699 signs impounded shows that the current local laws are working, because that means that things are being done to take them in, and the current amount of enforcement is working. What it also probably indicates is that there's a lot more candidates, because we've got 13 electorates in the city and up to 5 to 7 candidates per electorate, right? So the challenge is for a federal election you get less because there's only 3 electorates in the city and there's only 3 or 4 candidates per electorate. I think no matter where we land, it's probably worth, or definitely worth, doing the definition work, because there are some legal weirdness and loopholes about what we've got now. Even if we say no more enforcement, no more extra local laws, I think clarifying the definition, I know Councillor Bradley would be aware that Mick de Brenny's got a lot of signs up in Division 1 at the moment.
Can I just ask, Councillor Raven, are they left over from the last election, or are they
No,
in the
they're
lead
new.
up to the next one?
They are new, and they're not authorised. And so the question is, do they get the protection of political freedom of speech because they're not authorised as a political thing? They're not specifically saying vote for me. They're promoting Labor Party policy that he's pushing as the minister. But having a clearer definition of what an election sign is would make it easier for whether or not those are appropriate all year round. And the other challenge with a shorter period of, like a short period where you can only display them for 2 months before an election is that you don't just need 2 months of enforcement, you need enforcement all the time, because anyone who puts one out early will have to have it removed.
Point of order.
Councillor Wilcox?
We're not asking for it to be all of the time. We're asking for it to be in the election period.
Councillor Wilcox, thank you for your comment. I don't regard that as a point of order nonetheless, and I was happy to allow Councillor Raven to make his point, of which I would agree that there will be times when council officers will be out patrolling outside of election periods. You can continue, Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My preference is doesn't exist in any of the three options because it's too nuanced. I'm happy to support the position that councillors resolve otherwise, noting that I very strongly think we should do the definition work because that will give us some more protection, irrelevant of which
Councillor Raven,
motion we
did you
choose.
raise this in the workshops?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
At the moment we've got 2 months. I think 2 months is it disadvantages if option 2 gets selected, which is like the middle road that Councillor Fraser suggested. It is a good compromise, but 2 months is very, very short for a candidate who has no profile compared to what an incumbent has. So that's why I'm not comfortable with it. I support the Mayor's position and others in principle that candidates do deserve the opportunity to promote themselves, but I don't think we're here to protect candidates. We're here to represent the majority of constituents, and those constituents said loud and clear after the last election that there were too many signs around. I think, not getting into the next argument, but enforcement is probably the best way to address that rather than increasing legislation, because 699 signs shows that the local laws currently do their job. We just need to help the staff by giving them the resources to enforce.
Councillors, you note that some of the councillors haven't spoken at all, and I will ask Councillor Russell and also Councillor Murphy to consider whether they would like to add anything to the argument. I've given councillors latitude to speak for a second time. I've got Councillor Bradley, Councillor Hall, and I'm unsure whether I actually have Councillor Lane. Councillor Lane, have you got your hand up at the moment? Councillor Lane does have a hand up, but we're not sure if it came down from before. No. Okay, thank you. So no Councillor Lane. And I've got Councillor... Thank you, Councillor Lane. So Councillor Bannon. So here's what we're going to do. We're going Councillor Bradley, Councillor Hall, Councillor Bannon, and I would like Councillor Russell and Councillor Murphy to consider whether they have anything to add, because I'll be keen to actually bring this to a close. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. I'm very grateful that Councillor Raven mentioned about the state members' signs everywhere at the moment, which have been reported, by the way, because a lot of people have complained and even kicked them over. Anyway, that's not what I put my hand up for. It really, I agree with Councillor Wilcox. The first election I was in 2006, there were 11 candidates for that division, plus mayoral candidates. It was a dog's breakfast of visual pollution and created so much furor in the community, and we were allowed only 50 signs back then. So there were restrictions once upon a time, and it's become free for all, and that it has created more problems. As stated, last election, so many people complained, and I've already moved. It's been seconded. I would like the motion be put. Thank you.
That's noted, Councillor Bradley. I'd like to give the opportunity for everyone to have their say. I don't want anyone to leave here feeling that they didn't have the opportunity to speak their piece. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, through the chair. John, you could get a job at the circus. You went one way and then you did a backward somersault, come back the other way, and then you did triple somersault and come back again. Amazing work there. I'm impressed. Look, all this is going to do is make it easier for the people doing the wrong thing to get in, and all of a sudden the wrong people are your elected representatives. That's not what we want. If certain councillors at the moment feel that there is an issue with signs, well, you don't need to change the rules, just don't put signs out. Lead by example. Yeah, don't put signs out. You don't have to. But don't make it harder for anyone else. Guys, you've already got a lap in the swimming pool, okay? You've already got a head start. You're already elected. You don't need to cut the feed off the people swimming against you. You've already got a lap ahead of them.
Point of order.
Give them a fair chance. Give them the same chance that we had of getting elected. The best people will get in. The best people will get in if it's fair for everyone. Because at the moment, if we shut the gate, it will be unfair. It'll be unfair for the person who wants to do the right thing, but wants to get their name out, they won't have the opportunity to do so, and the person doing the wrong thing will just destroy them because they will have signs out.
Thank you, Councillor
That's my
Hall.
closing argument. Thank you.
We sense a lot of passion there. Councillor Bannon.
Yeah, no, that was a tough one. Jesus, man's on fire. I just think the last election, if we're going off numbers, but if we're going off how many fines and how many things happened, you've got to remember the llast election was totally extraordinary because there was no incumbents at all. So you had 13 seats, no one in them. That's why you had so many signs, because there was like 5 candidates every single seat. So you'd have to, if you want to be specific on numbers, you have to go through all the elections which he's gone through and say how many fines have we had over the last 10 elections. Because the last election will probably never happen again. Well, we hope it doesn't. Like, and honestly, I don't really care what other people do. Like, it's Councillor Brady's already said that she will not put signs up next election. So, like Tony said, if you don't want to put them up, don't put them up. But if we shouldn't be changing it. State government can change it if they want to. So, but you can't use those numbers because look at the amount of candidates compared to the election before that. That's why you've got different numbers in your fines.
Thank you, Councillor Bannon. Councillor Murphy, anything from you?
Thank you, through the chair. I agree with Councillor Raven with regards to the election signs and the clarity around that, because there's just no specific definition with regards to the election sign, and I know that I spoke about that in the briefing. I like option 2 as well. There's no limit on the signs. However, there is that period which we can adjust accordingly. But the biggest thing for me is that clarification around the election sign, which is not a huge change to option 1 already, which the others are speaking about. But at the end of the day, we're here to represent our residents, not the minority group running for council. Yes, they are the elected official. We're hoping that we get the right outcome, but they're a minority group compared to the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy, and thank you for bringing it back to what we're here for, which is to represent our residents. And Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been listening to everybody's arguments, and I actually appreciate elements of everything that everyone's sharing. This is the problem, is that it is actually a really complex, it's a complex issue because we all want the best for the community. But it's not as simple as whether we're representing the minority of people that are running versus the community. When we are defending democracy, we are actually representing our community. It's not about representing the people that decide to run as well. So it's just not as simple as that. In principle, I support a lot of elements of 2 and 3. However, that's in principle, because we can't separate the policy versus the enforcement. We can't separate them. One might work if we can enforce it, but I think that in the years gone by, it's been proven that the enforcement doesn't necessarily mean that the in principle laws will be followed. I suspect that arguments like this have happened many, many times over many, many elections, and the best response has landed at no change from what we've currently got. Don't get me wrong, I would love to see that we don't end up with the visual pollution around our community. I would love to see that we've got a shortened period of time that we're allowed to have signs out, but I actually don't think that I don't think it's possible for us to enforce it by changing these policies today. So I'll be voting no change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross, and I think you're right. If it was easy, we would have done it by now. Councillor Fraser, this is your lucky day. You're going to be the last speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, what a few of us have been saying is that, making as if election signs are the be-all and end-all of campaigning, when no, that's not. All that this is doing is limiting one aspect of people's campaigning. So there are many other ways to campaign, and if people think they can just stick out a few, or quite a few, cornflutes over a period of time, that isn't necessarily going to win them an election. There are many other things that need to be done. So this isn't limiting further activities that should be done prior, but it's a matter of opinion, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely not the be-all and end-all of campaigning at all.
Well said, Councillor Fraser. Councillors, I allowed everyone the latitude to really vent their spleen today. I know that this is an issue out in the community among residents, and I also know there's some diverse views in this room. I thank you all for your consideration. How we will move forward on this is that I do have a mover for option 1. We'll move on option 1 first. If that's unsuccessful, we will then, sorry, I beg your pardon, option 3, I beg your pardon. We'll move on option 3 first. My apologies, Councillor Bradley. If that's unsuccessful, we will move to option 1, and if that's unsuccessful, we will then move to option 2. So please be clear about which option you're supporting, and we'll formalise this through the process so that the minute clerks can keep track of what's happening. On the board behind me is option 3. Could you please take a moment to just read that option? Okay, councillors, I have Councillor Bradley who's indicated she would like to move that motion in the first instance, and I had Councillor Wilcox indicate she would like to second that motion. Is that correct, Councillor Wilcox? Mr Mayor.
I've just noticed on the board, and can you go back to the start? Can I ask how much that will cost Council to draft that legislative instrument?
I believe it's in the report. What page is that on, please, Emily?
Through the chair, it's in Annex 1, it's $15,000 in legal fees.
Thank you.
Sorry?
I beg your pardon, $15,000 in legal fees, Mr Mayor.
The question would be that if we go to no change, we wouldn't have to pay that money.
Through the chair, that's correct.
As indicated in the report, Mr Mayor.
Sorry. I'll just bring that to your attention.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We don't want to break the flow here. All right, councillors, you have a motion that has been moved and seconded on the board. I'd like to see your hands held high for those who are in support of this option. And bearing in mind we've got Councillor Lane. Okay, councillors, that option has been lost. Okay, councillors, well...
May I ask a
Hang on,
question?
I've got Councillor Lane in my ear and I've got Councillor Bradley in my ear as well. I'll go to Councillor Bradley, then Councillor Lane. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Just want a clarification. Will it be recorded that I moved and it was seconded and...
Yes, that will form part of the minutes, yes. Councillor Lane.
Sorry, Madam Chair, are we voting on option 1?
We just voted on option 3, which has failed, and we're about to move to option 1. And Councillor Lane, just for the record, can we clarify how you voted?
I was against option 3.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Thank you. My apologies. It's hard to keep track. All right, councillors, we'll just take a moment to get the next option up on the board behind me.
And I'd like to move option 1. Sorry, yeah, option 1.
I have your name recorded, Mr Mayor. Just wait a moment, please. Councillor Bannon, do you have a question that relates
yes, I do. Sorry,
to
Madam
process?
Chair. I kind of like option 2, but it's hard to vote for it because I don't agree with the time spacing, so I'm a bit perplexed. I know we're voting option 1, but...
Councillor Bannon, you have 3 options ahead of you today. I'm sorry, they're the options we're choosing
can't
from.
vote for
That's not to
something.
say that there isn't latitude to make some amendments, but at this stage, they're the 3 options that are presented.
I can amend an option? Oh, but I just don't know. Stress level.
I'm very happy to listen to any ideas that you might have, but let's work through the process. Councillor Raven. All right, are we good to go? Mr Mayor has moved option 1. Councillors, can I please ask you to cast your eyes behind me to the board behind me? That it's not there yet, it's coming up. Point of order, Mr Councillor Raven.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's not option 1 because that says the whole report be received.
No,
And
option
there's-
1 is no change.
Yeah, so option 1 is... No. So
I'm
that
just
one,
going to take a moment to consult with the minute clerks and with the acting director, and we'll be right back with you.
The only thing you can do is say that there'll be no change to yeah, put it open habitat. Yep.
Nothing that will require you to ask for by autograph. Positive pressure. Consider it not just further orders, which probably
So we've just said that there'll be no amendment to the content of the hearing as detailed in the
Okay, councillors. First of all, I would just like to acknowledge Councillor Raven's point. Thank you for raising that, Councillor Raven. Moving forward, we do want to be very clear in what we're actually committing to today. So there's some rewording of option 1, and I'll read that out, that there be no amendment to the content of the local law as detailed in option 1 in the report of the City Standards and Animal Care Manager dated the 14th of September 2022 be received. So in effect, Mr Mayor, that is no change. Okay, Councillor Raven has a question.
just a clarification, Madam Chair. So we would still then move on to a discussion about enforcement, though, as a separate discussion? Yes, and...
Just correct, Emily? We move on to enforcement as an independent discussion?
Through the chair, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then with this no amendment to the content of local law, because there is no option that says just clarify the definition, would I be foreshadowing an amendment to this amendment to say that to give consideration to the definition being changed, or would I let this amendment go through and then put forward a separate motion saying happy with option 1 with the addition of definitions being introduced?
I will defer to the manager and the acting director.
It is clear as mud because, but there's a mover. Like, it's up to the chair. So my intention is to test. Well, what I would like to do, and I may not have any support for it whatsoever, is to test whether or not option 1, which is leave the conditions that we have in local law the same, but clarify the definition, because the definition currently has some pretty big legal loopholes in it. And leaving everything else the same. That's the question. And I don't know if I have support for it. The other way to test that is to move a motion Set. And Anita is coming to the rescue on her white horse. Emily's office would never do that.
Councillors, please bear with me. This is a ticklish one, and I know that we're all keen to meet a final decision today, so we'll just step this out one step at a time. So in the first instance, the Mayor has actually put forward the motion which is on the board behind me. That motion, I'm calling for a seconder, and Councillor Heremiah, are you still seconding this motion? You are. I note Councillor Raven has asked for an amendment to the motion, but I'm going to test the motion as it is in the first instance, and then we'll revisit the notion of amendment. So, councillors, you will see on the board behind me, there is a motion. I have a mover. I have a seconder. Can I see by a clear show of hands those who support the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4. Councillor Lane, how do you vote? Is that a hand up?
Option 1.
That's a hand up. That's 5. And that has failed. Okay. Thank you, councillors. So no need for an amendment at this stage. Councillor Raven. No. Okay, gotcha. What we're going to do is I'm going around the room so I can hear your voices loud and clear whether you're for, against or have abstained from that vote. Mr Mayor. Councillor Bradley.
Against.
Councillor Russell.
For.
Councillor Raven.
Abstain.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Fraser.
Strongly against.
Councillor Heremiah. Thank you. Councillor Heremiah. Councillor Bannon. Councillor Stamp.
Against.
Councillor Wilcox.
I'll be strongly against too.
Against. Councillor Murphy.
Against.
Okay, and Councillor Lane has indicated she is against, and I am also against. Sorry, she was for, I beg your pardon. Councillor Lane, we've got you recorded as for, my apologies, and I'm also against. Okay, councillors, you have a third option ahead of you, which is in fact option 2. I'll just give the minute clerks a moment to bring option 2 up. Throughout our discussions, Councillor Fraser, you were indicating support of option 2. I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder in just one moment. Let me know, ladies, when you're ready.
Can I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Of course you can, Mr Mayor.
If this number 2 fails, then we stay at status quo.
Then we will receive the report in all likelihood. Is that right, Brad? And which
the status quo then remains.
And unless there is another recommendation from the floor. Again, councillors, I thank you for your patience. I know this is a challenging one. Councillors, on the board behind me, you have an option, which is in fact option 2. That option is the middle road option, which will invoke a level of change. That option has been moved by Councillor Fraser. Do I have a seconder for the motion? I have a seconder for the motion with Councillor Stemp. Just a reminder, all councillors are free to vote if you've voted before. There's no reason you can't vote on this particular motion. It's a question I was asked by another councillor recently. Can I see, by a show of hands, out and proud, those who support option 2? Right. Okay. Councillor Lane, have you got your hand up or down at this? Okay, you need to pull your hand down.
Sorry.
That's okay. So she's against. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I make that 7. Is that correct? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That motion has carried. And just for the minute clerk, we'll go around the room just to make sure we've got everyone recorded. Mr. Mayor, how do you vote?
Because of the amount of money it's going to cost us, I voted against.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley? For. Councillor Russell?
Against.
Councillor Raven?
Abstain.
Councillor Hall?
Against. We shouldn't be changing the rules. For.
Councillor Fraser? Councillor Heremiah? Councillor Bannon? Councillor Stemp? For. Councillor Wilcox?
For.
Councillor Murphy?
For.
Councillor Lane?
Again.
And Councillor Kerensky is for. Councillors, that motion has carried. Thank you. Just take a moment to draw a breath and we'll move on to the second half. Okay, councillors, I know that many of us were eager to get into the area of enforcement, so that's where we're moving to next. So if you could please draw your attention to the second half of the report. I will give the manager opportunity to open the batting on this one before we get down to it. Councillor Bannon. So just bear with us for one moment. And Emily, could you just catch councillors up on what they're voting for? The second decision today relates to enforcement.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Through the chair, that's correct. The second decision relates to the degree of enforcement of the local law. So there are 4 options on the table. The first option being no change to the current enforcement regime in place. The second option being investment of $35,000 into increased marketing and education to build public awareness of the local law. Option 3 is more focused on enforcement, so that's a proactive targeted enforcement campaign each year involving one enforcement officer undertaking proactive surveillance and enforcement duties, including seizing signs and issuing fines each election period. Over a 5-year period, that equates to $200,000. And option 4 is a combination of both marketing and education and also proactive enforcement. So that comes at added cost again. Over a 5-year period, we estimate that comes at a $235,000 investment. So happy to take any more detailed questions on the matter.
Thank you, Emily. I might start the batting on this one. So given that councillors supported option 2 a moment ago, would you suggest that there is a companion piece to to our first motion with regard to the second motion?
Through the chair, any of these options are capable of being implemented. If councillors support option 2, councillors might want to turn their minds to the degree to which they seek for the law to be enforced. So those options, in my view, are options 2, 3 or 4. And it really depends on where councillors see value, best value spent, whether that be in marketing and education, enforcement or both. So we can ultimately deliver any one of these options subject to funding.
Excellent. Thank you for your thorough presentation. I think that makes it clear to everybody present. I've got Councillor Heremiah followed by Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Option 2 cost $35,000. Option 3 cost $200,000. Option 4 costs $235,000. I'm happy to move option 1, which costs $0.
Thank you, Councillor Herremeier. I'll note that, but I'm keen to give everybody an opportunity to have their say, so noted. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just curious what the 35,000 in advertising, marketing, education, etc. What for option 2? What does that entail? Because like we've always given out information. Has that always cost 35,000?
Thank you, Councillor Bradley, for that question. This is an estimate, and it mainly relates to increased. So you're quite correct. We do have a fact sheet on election signs, and we have a website presence. What we don't have at the moment is perhaps a fact sheet that's extremely clear. We don't currently do proactive educational work, for example, going to electoral forums to educate potential candidates on signage, and we haven't run previously any social media or marketing campaigns on a proactive basis. So that is what that approximate $35,000 spend equates to.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I think you have some comment around the last election. Yeah.
Every election I've been in, there has been information sent and it has been proactive. So I actually disagree with that. And can be sent electronically now. Like all the candidates we all know are known, and their email addresses, etc., are all known at election time. So I still can't understand why it would cost 35,000 anyway.
Through the chair, if I may respond to that, it's $35,000 over a 5-year period. So it's a $10,000 initial outlay for developing a marketing campaign and better materials. And then it's $5,000 per annum in employee expenses. So most of the cost is employee expenses, simply year on year, delivering this piece of work.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Thank you, Emily. Do I have any other questions? Thank you, Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. If we've put in a time period, I think we need to better bolster the enforcement so that we ensure that all candidates are doing the right thing across the board, so that we don't have 699 signs impounded and that sort of thing in the future. But to make it clear and simple for all is what we're trying to achieve, because candidates shouldn't just rely on their signage. I'm happy to move option 4. Yes, there's an increase in the marketing and the education, and that's what I read it as an increase in the marketing and the education to bolster information and make it clear and simple for all. Because yes, it can be viewed a bit ambiguously for those that have already run, have looked through sat through the information sessions and that sort of thing. So I'm happy to move option 4 so that we can have that dedicated enforcement and the increase in the marketing. And that sort of thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if we were to say pick option 3 or 4, it does give us another resource in enforcement of sign removal and stuff like that if need be. So how much of a difference will that be compared to what we have now? So for instance, some resident reports a sign that needs to be removed because it's in a dangerous position. So nowadays it might take X amount. What's that Y amount? What's the shorter time frame, I guess, that we're going to experience by putting this kind of money into this resource?
Thank you for that question. Through the chair, we currently have a team of local law officers that have general duties, which includes both election signs and signage more generally. This enforcement option contemplates a dedicated resource for a 3-month period over an election campaign to undertake proactive surveillance and enforcement activities. At the moment, the current state is we don't undertake generally, unless there's a public safety situation, we don't generally have the resources to undertake high levels of proactive enforcement. This option ensures a dedicated resource to specifically election signs. So the net effect will be no change to the way in which we manage signs generally, but it will ensure greater levels of enforcement for election signs specifically.
Thank you for your response, Emily. Any further questions, Councillor Fraser?
Oh, no, yeah, I did ask her how long is a piece of string sort of question. I do understand that, so it is hard to give an answer. But yeah, thank you for your answer.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be a little bit facetious here, but my understanding is that the community wants to see less marketing, and to fix it, we're going to bring in more marketing. Like we're not actually planning on having call flute signs to educate the community, are we?
Through the chair, it's a great point. We're yet to work through the detail of what any marketing campaign would look like, but we'd like to think it would be reliant in the digital space, I'd imagine, and also more of an in-person piece with candidates in forums.
Thank you so much, Emily. I know I was being a bit cheeky there, but yeah, thank you for answering the underlying question.
Thank you for the comic relief, Councillor Russell. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you through the chair. Councillor Wilcox has moved option 4. I'm happy to second option 4.
Councillor Lane, have you got a question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Emily, can you tell me what that staff member will be doing at other times when an election period is not in place? Because as we saw, in the space of a very short period of time, we had several elections. So what will they be doing at the other time?
Thank you, Councillor Lane. The officer, so the funding we have approximated relates to the employment of a temporary officer for a 3-month period to be engaged during an election period. So it wouldn't be the case that that officer would be engaged full-time all year round. It would simply be a short-term period to cover the elections. So, Councillor Lane, to answer your question, they wouldn't have any other duties other than to proactively do enforcement in relation to election signs for a fixed period. The price of the proactive targeted, through the chair, targeted enforcement option is $200,000 over a 5-year period. I'll lean a bit closer to the mic. $40,000 per annum, and that includes employee expenses, on costs and a dedicated vehicle. And over a 5-year period, that equates to $200,000.
It's a lot of money. Okay, thank you, Emily.
Councillor Hall.
What happens when the person through the chair. What happens when the person you appoint has a political bias?
We know that council officers are to act apolitically, and under these circumstances, I don't imagine that would be an issue. The rule would be consistent, and they would follow the rules consistently, or there would be repercussions, I would expect.
And the next one, what happens when someone moves someone else a sign and puts it in a legal position? Because that's happened before. That's happened time and time again. You'd have people doing the right thing, getting fined because their sign's been moved by someone else. How would you stop that? How would you even know that they've done that? You don't. We're making laws for what?
So, Councillor Hall, specifically your question is?
My question is, how are you going to tell the difference on when someone has actually put their sign out and when someone has picked up their sign and moved it and put it somewhere else? And yeah, how would you tell the difference?
Through the chair, thank you. That's a really great question, and that comes down to the practicalities of enforcement. We understand that this does happen, and it's where council officers just determined that an offence has occurred by a sign being placed in a location which contravenes the local law. we have a range of enforcement tools available, one of which is to seize the sign and impound it, another of which is to find who we think is a responsible person. If the responsible person, if the person that we say fine has a legal defence, for example, that they weren't involved in the commission of the offence, that'd be for them to bring that argument to council and for us to consider.
Thank you. And Councillor Hall, you raise a good point, but I'm keen for us to get back on track. We've got 4 options ahead of us, and I'm keen to close in on those. I've got Councillor Jeremiah with a very quick second question, and then Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question about the previous option, and the answer to that question will affect my opinion on the other options of this section. Option 2 has been agreed to for the content of the local law about limiting the period of display for election signs and clearing that definition up. For that limited period of display, is that applicable to election signs that are on council property or election signs that are on both council property and private property?
Through the chair, that is applicable to signs regardless of where they're placed in the city.
So it's about private property as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So with these other options, you would have council officers going and inspecting private property for election signs, and if so, and if it's a repeat offender, fining those people for having election signs on their private property.
Through the chair, just give me a moment to have a look at the content of the local law.
Take a moment, Emily, and I'll just walk through what's going to happen next. So we've got a question coming up from Councillor Raven, who hasn't yet had the opportunity to speak. Councillor Wilcox will be making a comment also. Do I have any other people who are looking at posing any questions at this stage? So, assuming that this doesn't go in a different direction, I actually have a motion that's been put forward by Councillor Jeremiah, so we will test the floor with that in the first instance. I have a second motion that's been put forward by Councillor Wilcox, and we'll be testing that in the second instance, and then we'll be looking to move forward. Okay, thank you, Emily.
Through the chair, and thank you for allowing me the liberty of a few moments to have a look at the local law. So this amendment does not contemplate regulating election signs on private property.
So since option 2 has been agreed to and assuming it's ratified by council, the option 2 that was agreed to is about limiting the period of display for election signs on council property like road reserves, not private property like people's houses.
Through the chair, the only regulation we have, it is complicated, so please allow me the time to work through it. The only ability we have currently to regulate signs on private property is the size of the sign. So the current local law limits signs to no more than 1.1 metres squared. So and we'd have to obviously come back with what that amendment will look like to a future committee for councillors to vote on. But in terms of limiting the period of display, I imagine that would relate to private property as well as on council land.
Okay, so option 2, assuming it's a bit vague whether or not it includes private property and council property with option 2, but I'm concerned that if option 2 is determined to include private property in the future, we will have council officers and inspectors inspecting private property to determine whether or not an election sign is displayed. And then you have the question of reasonableness, and you have the question of where is that election sign displayed? Is it displayed in the backyard? Is it displayed on the front yard? Is it displayed in a garage? Is it displayed in gated areas? So I'm really concerned about that. So I think that's more of a discussion maybe later on in the process about whether or not option 2 should include private property.
Thank you, Councillor Jeremiah. It's a good point. I know in other jurisdictions, so one of the reasons for option 2 better defining what is and isn't an election sign. One of the other local governments, for example, makes it really clear that an election sign isn't a sign displayed in someone's backyard that isn't visible to the public, or a sign displayed in a garage or the privacy of people's homes, because people have the right to, you know, their views, and particularly so in displaying images on private property. So nothing about this amendment would limit people's rights to display signage on their own property to the extent that it doesn't cause a safety or amenity issue.
Okay. So thank you for that. I'm going to stick with option 1 for the enforcement, mainly because we're talking about enforcing a local law that we haven't written yet. So, so for me to support other options, I would actually need to understand what that new local law will look like. So option 1 is the one for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And can I say, Councillor Heremiah, you raise a good point. Thank you. Moving on, Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to keep it snappy. So, Emily, are fines the first port of call for enforcement? Or will it be an escalating situation like with little Timmy's bin that he puts out?
Thank you for that question. Through the Chair, we obviously yet to determine what enforcement would look like. We have a range of enforcement tools available to us in any enforcement matter, and it really potentially depends on the seriousness of the matter and the flagrancy of the breach, which enforcement tool we'd rely on, whether that be seizure of the sign or fines or both. So we have no set process at this point, but it would really depend on proportionality, I imagine, and risk in the team deciding on what the best enforcement tool might be, if that makes sense.
That does.
Yeah.
So, okay. And then when we talk about the additional resources in option 3 and 4, when will these resources be deployed? Because you said that essentially staff would be assigned to it for a period. When does that period begin? Because with a defined period of display, theoretically I could start putting signs out now and you'd need a resource to enforce on what I'm doing. So when does that period begin, and how can you quantify that cost if you end up needing them all year round because people just ignore the rules?
Through the Chair, thank you. It is a good point. We do undertake enforcement all year round in relation to election signs in any event on a pretty much on a reactive and complaint-driven basis. So we do have a degree of enforcement as it currently stands, and that wouldn't change. But the purpose of engaging a person for a 3-month fixed term period would be just for the election period, I imagine.
So
2 months
proactive.
prior to, proactive, 2 months before and 1 month after, to ensure for that period that election signs were regulated. So that's the purpose of that particular option. But as a baseline, Council currently does do enforcement in any event.
So outside of that 3-month period, 2 months before and a month afterwards, we just have the normal reactive enforcement, but we'd have proactive enforcement in that actual election window.
That is correct.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you for clarifying. And something that Councillor Heremiah alluded to, as part of drafting the local law, we'll get another chop at the detail of this, won't we? So if we today vote to support 235,000, but then realise that that's not going to be enough, or that's way too much, and we actually see the intention of enforcement, we could modify that later, because it would have to ultimately come up as a budget decision to give you additional budget, wouldn't it?
Through the Chair, that is correct. If councillors voted on an option which required additional resourcing, you'll see that the draft recommendations require our branch to bring up a service enhancement in the next financial year to support that. And it is the case for the amendment option as well, that councils will get a view at a future committee on what that exact amendment is proposed to be.
Excellent. And so would we see that exact amendment prior to the budget process? So we'd be making an informed decision through the next budget process?
Through the Chair, yes, we would keep that moving very quickly.
Excellent. Thank you.
Also very good questions. Thank you, Councillor Raven. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. I like the idea of the escalating fines. I've said that before. You can make an honest mistake the first time, possibly the second, but by the 4th, 5th, 6th, that's not a mistake. That's just pure ignorance. This is in the interest of public amenity. Councillor Hall said something before, how do you know if your sign's been moved? I knew my signs had been moved. I was in my area constantly. I knew when a sign was moved. I knew when one was run over. I knew when one was mown. I got there and I either picked it up, cleaned it up, whatever I had to do, and I knew where my signs were because I marked it in a Refidex or I took a photo of where they were. So you should be able to know as a candidate, and as a candidate you shouldn't have to rely on just your signs to be elected. That's what we're talking about. But if we're going to put enforcement in there, perhaps in the fact sheets we can also have in there that other candidates should not be touching any other candidate's signs and moving them and that sort of thing. So maybe we can put that in the fact sheet to make sure that they're not doing it. But
Thank you for your thoughts, Councillor Wilcox. I'm actually going to put this to the vote now and noting that, Councillor Lane, have you got your hand up?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair.
I'll go Councillor Lane, then Councillor Hall. Councillor Lane. I agree with you, Councillor Lane. A number of mine went missing as well. I suspect I know where they are, and I certainly didn't put them there. Thank you for the point. Councillor Hall. Short and sharp, Councillor Hall. You're the last speaker.
Yep, through the chair. Deputy Mayor, it's great that you know where your signs are. Now they're going to be moved and you're going to be fined for them, and you're going to be too busy fighting legal things to focus on your election campaign, but that's just the way it is. It's not just rival candidates that will knock off signs. It's also, people who generally don't like you will knock off your sign. They'll move it all over. Being encumbrance, we will definitely be targeted. We're going to be the most targeted out of all candidates during an election. So, you guys, you're putting in rules where people can get fined for signs being moved. Guess who's going to hit it the hardest? It's going to hit us the hardest. So just be very careful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Before I go to the vote, Emily, do you have any closing remarks?
No, thank you, Councillor.
Okay, councillors, you have a motion before you. I believe it's on the board, or it's about to be. It's option 1, and Councillor Heremiah has moved that option, that there be no amendment to the enforcement of the local law as detailed in option 1 in the report of the City Standards and Animal Care Manager dated 14th September 2022.
A question, please.
You can ask a question, yes.
Thank you. There was a mover and a seconder for option 4. Is there a seconder for option 2, or what?
I'll call for a seconder for option 2 now.
Okay, I'm just curious as to the process. Is this correct process for meeting codes, please? Because there's a mover and a seconder already for option 2. I would have thought that would be put up first. Option 4, sorry.
Madam Chair, given that I went through the entire meeting code last night, as Anita knows, and I sent her many, many questions.
That you don't get added credit for that. All right.
But because it's fresh in my mind.
But I welcome your input, Councillor Raven.
When there is a mover and a seconder, unless there's a motion, which is a procedural motion, that the motion be put and that gets voted up, the chair can choose when you accept the mover and the seconder.
That was my understanding, is that I had the latitude to choose, and Councillor Heremiah had put his position forward first. But Councillor Bradley, I note your point that Councillor Wilcox actually moved option 4, which was seconded by you. I'll be testing both today, but I will be moving on option 1 first, as I indicated when Councillor Heremiah put his hand up in the first instance. If Councillor Heremiah is unsuccessful in getting a seconder, then that will fall. Councillors, you have that motion on the board behind me, which has been moved by Councillor Heremiah. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Russell has seconded that motion. Can I see by a show of hands the support for that motion? 1, up high, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Councillor Lane, how do you vote?
Support.
The hand is up, so that motion has been carried. Councillors, just for the benefit of the minute clerk, we'll go through you one at a time. Mr Mayor, how do you vote? Councillor Bradley?
Strongly against.
Councillor Russell?
Emphatically for.
Councillor Raven?
I profoundly abstain.
Councillor Hall?
Super duper for.
Councillor Fraser?
Against.
Councillor Heremiah? Councillor Bannon?
For.
Councillor Stamp, adjective?
For.
Councillor Wilcox?
Dead set against.
Councillor Murphy?
Against.
Councillor Lane? And I abstain. Thank you, councillors. That motion is carried. I thank you for your patience, everyone. If I may, I'd just like to say thank you, Emily. I know that this has been a challenging process in bringing election signs back to councillors, and please pass on our thanks to your team for all the great work that's been done in the background. Councillors, I'd also like to thank you for your great work. I know there's some passion in the room with regard to this particular issue. This morning was exhausting, and I thank you for bending your minds to really giving consideration on what you believe is in the best interests of our community. So thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just ask Emily, I just want to clarify the outcome of this with option 2 in regard to the first motion. This new legislative process will limit councillors and candidates to putting signage up 2 months before an election, correct? So when you go to the options, option 2 was looking at restricting the signage going up an election 2 months before, but that only prohibits signage on private property. That doesn't prohibit signage on trailers or vehicles?
Through the chair, none of the options proposed
No,
contemplate limiting signage on trailers.
and that doesn't prohibit signage going up on billboards?
Through the chair, it limits the existing local law limits the size of signage that can be displayed.
Sorry, Emily. So I can put, yes or no, can I put signage up on a billboard outside of that 2 months? Because these are the questions I'm going to get from candidates.
Through the chair, I may need to take that on notice, but there's potentially, and it really depends on the content of that billboard as to whether it's an election sign or whether it's simply a sign that's got a, that's...
So we don't constrict signage on billboards for advertising? Because that would be obviously contested. Because these are licensed signs that carry a commercial value, and obviously the signage people would possibly take us to court, and also political parties would like to get their voice across outside of election process. So I'm taking it that billboards and trailers are exempt from this new option 2.
There is just looking at the current local law in place through the chair, the local law limits election signs to 1.1 metres squared unless the election sign is displayed on an approved advertisement, and that's an advertisement, say, approved under...
The reason why I say that is there are political messages going up on billboards, 2 years outside of election. Like, you can't stop that signage going up. In fact, there's one now outside the Hyperdome. Anna, please fix the energy crisis. That would be considered to be a political billboard of type. So can I just get some clarification between now and the council meeting whether or not I want to 100% guarantee what that exempts and what it allows? Thank you.
Through the chair, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amendments proposed in relation to the definition of election sign would make it really clear, a lot clearer currently, what an election sign is and what an election sign isn't. I think that's part of the current challenge, is that is not clearly defined. So any future amendment would to the local law would be really clear on that, and councillors would vote on that. The purpose of today is to decide in principle of whether better clarity is required from a policy perspective.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'll just remind councillors that motion has been moved, seconded, voted on and carried. So we'll now move into general business. And I note that I have a couple of councillors with their hands up for general business, and I'll kick off with Councillor Herrmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my intention is not to relitigate. I'm just seeking clarification regarding a previous decision of this committee. And it's in regards to that option 2 of the content of the local law. To clarify, will there be a report coming back in the future that discusses what that clearer definition of election signs will be?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. That will be an amendment by way of markup of the existing local law, being really clear about what, to the extent that we can be really clear, of what an election sign is and what it isn't.
Great. And with the vote today on this table and the recommendation about limiting the period of display, it doesn't define it to the point where it says public land and private land. Is that correct, that right now it's on a higher level than going down to defining whether or not that period of display is applicable for both public land and private land? It's not defined yet, and that will be defined later on in this process. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you, Councillor Herrmeyer. Through the chair, we can come back, without wanting to confuse this policy development process, we can come back with some options in relation to that on a more nuanced basis. At the moment, the limit of period of display is for all election signs in the city generally, whether that be council land or private land. But if councillors want to vote on whether that should just relate to council land or public or private property or both, we can certainly provide those options at that point in time.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Herrmeyer. Councillor Hall.
Can of worms. You can't regulate what someone puts on a vehicle, and if you do, they'll probably just fly them on helicopters and find other creative drones. Put it on the moon. I don't know. There's many ways. Why is that a point of order?
Can I just say, as the chair, I like to chair the meeting, so if I find it offensive, I'll let them know. I like to give councillors the opportunity to vent their spleen in this space so that when we leave here at the end of the day, we've all had the opportunity to speak and we've all had the opportunity to put our positions forward, and if anyone oversteps, as I see it, as chair, I'll pull them into line. Thank you, councillors. I will ask if there's any other general business, preferably not relating to election signs. Any general business for the manager? Thank you, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. This is a genuine general business item rather than venting my spleen. I'm just curious, will we be reviewing the timeframe for illegal signs that are actually out in the public at the moment? Because I find it ridiculous that people can put up signs, roof restoration signs on power poles everywhere, and there's like a month or whatever until the officers have to do something about it. And, you know, they're getting free advertising for that month. So is there an opportunity to, and even the election signs that are out at the moment in Division 1, you know, is there an opportunity for that to be looked at some stage in the future?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Bradley. That's a really great observation. It's an observation that a few councillors are making at the moment in multiple divisions, that this is becoming a bit of a tipping point. And while we don't, in regulation, seek to limit private businesses being able to advertise lawfully, equally we may have reached a tipping point in which the display of signage is impacting amenity. Certainly in some parts of the city where we're trialling a more proactive approach and narrowing the enforcement timeframes. Historically, the team has had a fairly generous time frame to give people the opportunity to voluntarily comply by removing their signs, but you know, we can't necessarily continue to operate on that basis where there are volumes of signage. So we are currently, and I apologise, my counterpart Sherry's away ill this week, but Sherry's looking at all of the current business practices across the board, acknowledging that the size of the team hasn't grown, but we've got to look to become more effective and efficient in the way we do enforcement, and that will likely result in shortening those enforcement timeframes and looking at tighter consequences for businesses that continue to display signage unlawfully.
Thanks, Emily. I'm looking forward to seeing some of that work come forward as well. Councillors, do you have any other general business for the manager?
Sorry, Madam Chair.
My apologies, Councillor Lane. I do know you're there, but it's hard to see you. So, Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Through the chair. Sorry, that faded out.
So the question really, Emily, is, and I agree with Councillor Lane, is that we seem to be seeing a greater proliferation of illegal signs around the city, and whether there'll be greater proactive enforcement with regard to that, because it seems that there might be those out there who aren't taking our warnings seriously. So, you know, we'd like to start to see those getting cleaned up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Through the chair, where, as I said before, we're currently reviewing our processes around unlawful signage, and I can't help but agree we do take a fairly permissive approach, and that's borne about by the fine balance that we need to walk between enabling people to lawfully display signage in the city, and the local law does permit that to a very limited extent, but also being taken seriously. So what I can offer is to perhaps come back to a councillor briefing with an enforcement strategy, which makes it really clear on how we will approach these, to give councillors added confidence around how we're managing these, if councillors would like.
Councillor Lane, would you support a briefing on further enforcement?
Yes, I would.
Excellent. Emily, could you please make that so?
Certainly can do.
That would be fantastic. Emily, any other general business for councillors?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to your team. We really appreciate your hard work. Councillors, that marks the end of the City Standards and Animal Care Managers reports. We'll now move on to item 7.1. 7.1 is the disposal of parks assets and asset write-off approval. And can I please invite the Acting Parks Manager, Mr. Brent Dowden, to enter discussions. But before we get into any discussion on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they wish to declare? There being none, I'll now invite Mr. Dowden to open public discussions. Thank you, Brent.
Sorry, wrong way. Thank you for the welcome, and good morning, everyone. I also just want to introduce Chris McKenna. He's our subject matter expert on what we'll be discussing, so he's here so we can provide you with as much information as possible. And yes, so this report is seeking appropriate delegated authority to approve an asset write-off and demolition of some assets that we've got, which are listed in the table. The reason for that is that these assets have a written down value in excess of our CEO's dollar threshold of $40,000, and therefore we're coming to yourselves to seek that approval. I'd take the report as read and happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, councillors. I've got a question for Councillor Raven.
I'm happy to move when you're ready, Madam Chair, noting that $40,000 seems a very low threshold for a billion-dollar organisation, so there might be something we need to consider reviewing in future.
Noted, Councillor Raven. Councillor Murphy, did you have your hand up? Yes. Thank you, Councillor Murphy.
Through the chair, thank you very much. Brent, I just wanted noted that in my area, Logan River Parklands, the pontoon, it was brand new, but experienced extensive damage through the recent flooding. So thank you for looking into this. The community will look forward to a new one coming. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Brent, just clarifying, as I did mention the other day, in relation to the toilet block at ACP, I think we've mentioned that this is purely gaining approval for the write-off of this, because it does talk about the demolition and so forth, but at this point with planning and so forth, we don't know whether that's going to be demolished or whether it's going to be relocated. There's still a bit of discussion in that space. So this is purely gaining approval for that if needed, but obviously the planning of the actual park itself will determine exactly what happens.
Thank you. Through the Chair, Councillor Stamp, that is correct. Obviously with the asset write-offs, because we need to bring them up here for consideration, we'll batch them together. So we try and do that to get ahead of the curve and so we don't get delays unnecessarily. So that's the whole reason. So all those discussions will definitely still transpire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Any other questions? Councillors? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Lane, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, sorry.
Thank you.
On the
Thank you. Through the Chair, that's a very good question, Councillor Lane. And we always do look at flood resilience matters as part of our design. I know particularly with this pontoon, there was a shackle that broke on it. There is actually a chain that stops the pontoon from moving higher than the existing pier height. But there was a failure in there, and that's why the one side of it actually lifted off and came untethered to a degree. And that's why this particular one failed, but we do take that into consideration. Had everything worked as it was meant to, then it is likely to believe that that failure wouldn't have occurred. The piles are actually still there. They're in very good condition. The abutment is still there. It's in very good condition. So it's actually just the one side came off because of that issue with the chain.
Thanks, Councillor Lane. Do I have any other questions from any councillors? I've actually had Councillor Raven already move it. Councillor Murphy has seconded. You're an enthusiastic bunch today. Could I please see by a show of hands all those who are in support? And Councillor Lane, you've got your hand up.
I do,
thank you. That's unanimously supported. Thank you, Brent. Okay. All right, councillors, that brings us to the next item, which is item 7.2. 7.2 is land acquisition in Rochdale South. Before we open discussions on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they wish to declare? There being none, I note that item 7.2 is a confidential item. It's considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as this matter relates to the Local Government Regulation 2012, Queensland, Section 254J3G, negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government, as the content of the report contains confidential details of property transactions. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item? Thank you. Councillor Raven has asked that we move into closed session. Do I need a seconder, Councillor Raven, for closed? Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Wilcox moved into seconded that motion. Can I see by a show of hands all those who'd like to move into confidential? Mr Mayor, you don't want to move into confidential? Yep. You do? Okay. Councillor Lane, is your hand up? Excellent. That has been. Thank you, Councillor Lane. That has been unanimously supported. Thank you, councillors. We'll just take a brief moment. And I'll just give our clerk, we're all ready to go down the back. Excellent, thank you. All right, councillors, thank you for your attention. You'll see that there's a notice, a motion on the board behind me. Could I, about to pop up, just one more minute and then we'll be ready to go. Just a reminder, councillors, if you're wanting to sign the condolence book for Her Majesty, the condolence books are in our libraries and in our customer service centres, and of course there's also available downstairs at the main reception on your way in. Thank you for your patience, everyone. You'll see behind me that there's a motion on the board. Do I have a mover for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. A seconder for the motion? Mr Mayor, thank you. Can I see by a show of hands those who are in favour? Thank you. And Councillor Lane, your hand's up? Excellent. Thank you, everyone. That has been unanimously supported. Thank you. Councillors, that marks the end of the Acting Manager's report. Do we have any general business for the Parks Manager? There being none, Brent, do you have any GB for us?
I do not, and thanks for your support.
Thank you very much, Brent. Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, councillors, that completes our agenda for today. Does anyone have any general business for the Acting Director of Community Services? Brad's been working very diligently in the background today. No? Brad, do you have any general business for us? No, no. My apologies, we nearly made it there. Thank you, Councillor Lane. Thank you, Councillor. That will be done. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the City Lifestyle Committee meeting of the 14th of September 2022, and the meeting is concluded at 11:35 a.m. The meeting of the City Governance Committee will commence in 10 minutes' time. Thanks, everyone.